What's up, a Cinema Shogun here with a few updates for you all coming out of Ukraine. The main story revolving around the war in Ukraine continues to be these fighter jets that were supposed to be provided to Ukraine by the EU, and more specifically by Poland. You might remember that early on in this conflict, it was announced that EU is going to provide Ukraine with fighter jets. And it was even announced that those fighter jets were going to be in the sky by that night. But unfortunately, that time has yet to come. These fighter jets never made it to the sky. But there was a lot of different news stories going on revolving around the situation. There was a lot of finger pointing going on. There's a lot of hearsay. There was a lot of misinformation being spread. Poland even accused the U.S. of spreading misinformation because it was reported that not only were Ukrainian fighter pilots on their way to pick up these planes from Poland, but they were going to launch these planes and take off from Polish airports and from Polish airways or runways, and that they were even going to be able to launch some of their missions directly from these Polish airports and these Polish air bases. And Poland absolutely refuted that, said that is nowhere near the case, and that they aren't even sure if they're going to provide fighter jets or not. So there's been a lot of back and forth, and still Ukraine has yet to be provided with these fighter jets. So while there's been all this back and forth, Poland now announced that it was ready to deploy all of its MiG-29 jets to Ramstein Air Base in Germany and put them at the disposal of the United States, its foreign ministry said, urging other NATO members that own planes of that type to do the same. Let me reread that for you all. Poland is ready to deploy these fighter jets to the Ramstein Air Base in Germany and put them at the disposal of the United States. Interesting wording, right? They didn't say they're ready to put them at the disposal of Ukraine, rather to put them at the disposal of the United States. So Poland is basically saying, okay, we'll provide Ukraine with these fighter jets, but not directly. We're going to provide them to the U.S., and then the U.S. needs to provide them to Poland. To provide them to Ukraine. So how does that sound to you all? It sounds like there's a lot of disagreements here going on between NATO, right? When I heard that Poland was like, oh, the U.S. is spreading misinformation and fake news, I knew that there was a little bit of tension going on here. And I can't quite put my finger on exactly what's going on, but from the outside looking in, it almost looks like the U.S. is trying to egg Poland on into doing things that they're not necessarily comfortable with. Like, for one, providing Ukraine with fighter jets is dangerous enough for them. They're right on the border of Ukraine, and they don't want to enter into this conflict directly. I know providing humanitarian aid and things of that nature is okay, but once you're providing fighter jets and you're literally are supposedly going to let these fighter pilots, these jets, take off from your country, like they're going to be launching their missions from your country, now you're directly involved in this war. Directly involved in this war. And that puts that country at risk of, retaliation from Russia. And it seems like the U.S. is kind of almost poking it and edging it on, trying to get Poland to do things that the U.S. isn't even comfortable doing. Because now the U.S. is acting like, oh, well, we're not sure if we should do this. The U.S. is kind of backing out oh, no, Poland, you need to go ahead and give them the fighter jets, but we don't want you to give us the fighter jets to provide to them. Y'all need to just handle this yourself, is basically what's going on here. And it's at first the U.S. was totally fine with Poland giving these jets to Ukraine. But now that Poland's no, we're going to give these jets to you all, and then you all give them to Ukraine, now the U.S. is taking a step back and saying that this is a serious concern for NATO, that providing these jets, that maybe they need to think this thing out, which, albeit, I told you all from the beginning when I was first reporting on this, that once you're starting to provide, fighter jets, and let alone saying that these fighter jets were going to take off from runways in other countries and stuff, now you're really pushing the limits of, what you can do before you're just fully involved in this conflict. Providing all these weapons that they provided Ukraine is enough, for many people to maybe retaliate. if the U.S. was in a situation like this and other countries were directly arming those countries to fight us, I wouldn't put it past the U.S. to retaliate, you know? And here, when you're literally saying that these fighter jets can launch missions out of a country that is on the border of Ukraine, you know, it's a very sticky situation. So the U.S. now is like, oh, wait, we don't know. Maybe we shouldn't do this. It was okay when Poland was going to do it, but they don't want to directly do it themselves, which is why I say from the outside looking in, you really have to question some of the motives here, you know, because why are you pushing Poland to do something that you're not willing to do yourself? You know, and then you were acting like this is all a good idea. Yeah, go ahead, provide Ukraine with these fighter jets. And then when Poland was like, all right, well, here's the fighter jets. We're going to send them to Germany, you know, and then y'all handle it from here. And then the U.S. is like, oh, no. Y'all need to handle it yourself. So now the press secretary for the Pentagon, John F. Kirby, was forced to make a statement about the situation in which he says, "We are now in contact with the Polish government following the statement issued today. As we have said, the decision about whether to transfer Polish-owned planes to Ukraine is ultimately one for the Polish government. We will continue consulting with our allies and partners about our ongoing security assistance to Ukraine because, in fact, Poland's proposal shows just some of the complexities this issue presents. The prospect of fighter jets at the disposal of the government of the United States of America departing from a U.S. NATO base in Germany to fly into the airspace that is contested with Russia over Ukraine raises serious concerns for the entire NATO alliance. It is simply not clear to us that there is a substantive rationale for it. We will continue to consult with Poland and our other NATO allies about this issue and the difficult logistical challenges it presents, but we do not believe Poland's proposal is a tenable one." So you see the level of deflection that we've gotten from the Pentagon now that they put the ball in our court? Can you see this? How hypocritical this is? That, oh, Poland, it's perfectly fine if you provide these fighter jets. It's perfectly fine if they fly from your airports, from your air bases, from your runways. That's fine. But we can't fly them from a U.S. NATO base in Germany. Of course not. That's preposterous. Never mind the fact that Poland's also a part of NATO, right? So what is the big difference? Other than they want the blame from the situation to fall on Poland as opposed to the United States. Yet the United States is the one egging this on. The United States is the one egging on all of these countries to provide all of this assistance because the United States is the one most interested in this war. These other EU countries, the countries in Europe and stuff, they're fully aware of how bad this can be. Over here in the United States, we have a disconnection from a lot of this stuff because we are not landlocked with these countries. We have a vast ocean between us. These people are right on the doorstep of this situation happening, and they need to be a little more cautious. Yet the U.S. is urging all of these various countries to get more and more involved, while at the same time trying to disconnect themselves from the involvement. The U.S. has been instrumental in basically egging Poland on to provide these fighter jets, but then when Poland has kind of been like, oh, we don't know if we want to do this yet, and oh, okay, well, we will do it, but we're going to provide the fighter jets to this NATO base, and then y'all handle it from there. Now it's a big deal. Now, oh, what about the complexities? This situation is so complex. What about the concerns for the entire NATO alliance? What about the concerns for the NATO alliance when Poland was going to be the one, allowing Ukrainian pilots to fly directly from their air bases? I guess y'all didn't care about Poland. Or maybe, just maybe, possibly, I'm not saying this is the case, but possibly someone has to, it's in someone's interest to make this war turn into something bigger and to involve other countries. Maybe possibly someone wants Russia to retaliate against Poland. Maybe they want this situation to get as worse as they possibly can so they can take advantage of it. I'm just saying, it's a possibility, right? But that situation continues going on about these fighter jets. So Ukraine still remains without fighter jets. But the Pentagon also released a new assessment of the number of Russian troops killed in Ukraine. They're still saying that it is around 2,000 to 4,000 troops. But now Ukraine is reporting that they've killed up to 12,000 troops. So we're continuing to get conflicting reports from all sides. The U.S. is saying a certain number. Ukraine is saying a certain number. Russia is saying a certain number. No one knows the exact number. But the U.S. also said that it believes a small number of Russian reconnaissance elements are starting street fights inside of Kiev in an effort to disrupt normal life. And wow, you know, finally the U.S. reports on something that I reported to you all like a week or two ago. I was literally bringing you all videos and telling you all about this situation 2 or 3 weeks ago, that this convoy that's on the way to Kiev, those aren't the first forces to make it to Kiev. There's already been skirmishes happening in Kiev already. There's already been little, I don't know what to call them, maybe they're scouters or whatnot, but there's been little pockets of fighting going on throughout Kiev. There's already been forces in Kiev for a while now, but it hasn't been a large-scale invasion of the capital city, but there's already been clashes. And now the U.S. is like, oh, we believe there's a small number of Russian reconnaissance elements out there starting street fights. Oh, yeah, thanks. The world knew that 3 weeks ago. But, hey, you know, it is what it is. But the U.S. also says that Russia has prepared up to 11 tank landing ships in the Black Sea for amphibious assaults on Ukraine, which is another thing that I reported to you all already, that it looks like Russia is ready to start launching an amphibious assault on Ukraine, as in there's Russian ships right on the outskirts of the coast of Ukraine, and they look like at any day they're going to attack. Now, one of those ships, I believe, was sunk by the Ukrainian forces, and one other ship was forced to flee when it was trying to make it closer to land. But we're going to see that portion of the invasion starting soon. Those ships aren't sitting out there for no reason. It's just a matter of time. I'm assuming that they're waiting on certain airstrikes and ground forces to do certain things on the ground before they land these troops. They probably want to take out certain, you know, strategical defenses and stuff of Ukraine's before they just land the troops right here on the beach, you know, and turn them into cannon fodder, if you will. So that situation continues to unfold, but they have yet to land these troops. Now, over the last couple of days, it seems like Russia has reduced its attacks on the Ukrainian military and military targets, and they've increased their attacks on civilian areas, which is also another situation that I told y'all that I expected to see going forward, that this is no longer about crippling the Ukrainian military. It's about crippling the will of the people. Although some of us could probably say that maybe these attacks on civilians won't cripple the will of the people at all. In fact, it will make them stronger and make them rally behind the cause even more. But earlier today, they attacked a maternity ward in Ukraine, and we're continuing to see apartment complexes, hospitals, you name it, all just getting hit by straight direct shelling and missile fire, like strategic attacks, purposely taking out these areas. And it's a really sad situation to see. You know, there's been a lot of civilian casualties, and these are the parts of war that you just, you know, you would hope that both sides are. War is already bad enough in itself, but you would hope that both sides are at least civil enough to not sit here and blow up maternity wards and stuff like that. But, you know, it is what it is. That's how ugly war can get. And it's a situation that's really bad right now, but it's a situation that's only going to get worse, unfortunately. And that was kind of what I was trying to prep you all for, because from the way that a lot of media covers it, it makes you like hyped up for war. Like, yeah, go Ukraine. And you see like the president of Ukraine and he's staying with his people. And then you see all these clips of like people signing up for the Ukrainian military. And it gets you all hyped up for it and, you know, in support of it. But then you don't really stop and think about like the horrors of war and what these people are actually going through. And that's something that I wanted to prepare my audience for, because I don't feel like the mainstream media is doing a good enough job at preparing people for that. They're getting people hyped up for the situation and really in many ways hyping it up to make people believe that this situation isn't going to be as bad as it's going to be, that Ukraine has this, you know, the military of Ukraine, they got this, no worries, guys. And they show you all this destroyed Russian equipment and all of these dead Russian soldiers, and they show you all this Ukrainian propaganda, but then you never really get to see both sides of it, and you don't realize how horrific this situation can get and how horrific the situation has already gotten. But yeah, we're starting to see more civilian areas get targeted. It is now being reported that 516 civilians have been killed so far in Ukraine. That includes 37 children, but those are just the numbers that are accounted for right now. There are countless people buried under buildings that have been destroyed. You name it, there's so many people who haven't been accounted for yet. And it's also stating that Russia has lost 56 planes and 86 helicopters just in the first couple of weeks of fighting this war. So Russia is, you know, losing their fair share of lives and equipment as well. But Putin actually stated, or the Kremlin, a spokesperson for the Kremlin, stated that Putin was unaware that Russian conscripts were sent to Ukraine. He claimed that Russian armed forces were told not to involve conscripts. And this is the first time that Russia acknowledged that there were conscripts involved in this war. It's already been too widespread that people know now that, oh, you literally have young kids who are in training out here in full-scale war. We've seen countless videos of it. We've seen different accounts of Russian kids calling home to their mom, letting them know that while they were supposedly on this training exercise, that they got sent to invade Ukraine. And Putin is claiming that he told them not to do that. And I think that's total BS, of course. I don't think nothing gets past Putin. I don't think that I would put it past Putin at all to send these young conscripts into war. So yeah, I'm not buying that. That's bogus BS. Coming out of the Kremlin for sure, no doubt about that. But I mean, how could you be unaware? How could you be unaware? You were very aware that a lot of these troops that were on the border were young troops, young kids who were still in training and were not prepared for what the hell you were about to send them into. You were very aware of this. This is not something that happened overnight. This wasn't a situation that you just thought of spur of the moment. You were building these forces up on the border of Ukraine for months on end, and you had this thing well planned out, and you knew exactly who you had on the border. You put a lot of your old equipment, and you put a lot of your youngest troops out there. Low experienced troops, equipment that was old as hell and is being destroyed left and right, and you basically sent your worst. Like, purposely sent your worst out there because you want to hold your best for just in case this situation, evolves into World War III. So whatever you're sending out there right now, you viewed as expendable. That's why you sent all this old ass equipment and all of these troops that are barely trained and have no idea what's going on. And that's why this invasion is going so bad for y'all right now, period. But I want to know your thoughts about all of this down in the comments below. While you're down there, hit that thumbs up button, hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell, and as always, find some time out of your day to get World War III off your mind and go watch a movie or something.